A lot to think about from our readings this week and the videos that we saw. One of the things was about systems thinking itself, with Serge Senge telling us that we can think of it as a family dynamic, because for most people that's easier rather than trying to understand the abstraction of systems. And then with speaking to us about the complexities of systems and the way we can't see all the moving parts. I thought that was very useful in his second video. In the systems thinking for educators, the speaker says at minute 1 that people are not particularly well equipped for systems thinking. And she follows up at minute 110. She adds that the more complex the given system dynamic, the more difficult it is to know how decisions will play out. If anybody is in a family that is large and spread out all over the country, I think we can all just inherently understand how easy it is for something that you had no intention to upset anybody with can cause a major problem in ways that you never would have imagined. So I find that those were really good examples. And also the systems theory basics video, speaking about how the observer effect of the observer looking changes the outcome, was interesting to me in the terms of feedback loops, because I've written a lot about quantum physics and quantum entanglement, and the same thing, we're learning the same thing about observing experiments and things that are going on at the molecular level and the effect that an observer has, even if the observer isn't speaking or doing anything, which is kind of spooky, but kind of cool. But all of that comes down to the fact that Goodwin says in his video at 106 that your worldview affects how you perceive something, which leads us to the question that if you've been given the go-ahead to implement a project related to the distance education context, what are 2 or 3 components of the larger system you will have to consider and interact with to implement your project successfully? First of all, one of the things I will have to think about, because I want to work with underserved communities, is that people may not take it in the spirit that it's meant. I have the time and talent to help in places that may not get what they need. And I just think that that's shameful in a country that's as well off as America. The other thing is that there's a lack of infrastructure for what I want to do. And I would need to be able to bring the equipment that I would need to these children largely, and find a way to do that. Maybe through the library system, because libraries are becoming more and more a social place for a lot of different programs, and maybe that would work. But I don't know how that would work in conjunction with the school system, because sometimes I found that by going in to teach writing after school, there are a lot of teachers who are not that happy about it, because they look at it like I'm cherry picking and doing the fun part while they have to do the whole thing. So that's another problem as far as the systems thinking that I'm not sure what to do about. As far as how each component might contribute to or stand in the way of the success of your project, I really believe we need as much pulling together as we can have in order to bring everybody everything they need. I've worked with a lot of different groups in a lot of different ways to bring these techniques to kids. I know they work because I've seen the kids, I've seen the grades, I've heard from the parents, but I'm not always sure how I can get everybody on board at the same time. So I think it would need to go through a social thing like the library or community center rather than through a school. I think that having teachers involved in planning things would go a long way toward giving it legitimacy. And I think that just showing up and being consistent will ultimately prove that this is a sincere effort and that the kids will benefit. But the one thing that I was surprised about analyzing the complexities of online education, and I don't mean showing up in person, I mean showing up in person to get it started and then online as things go with remote and distance learning. But this whole idea is that while they speak about what you need to know and how you might counteract it, this is a largely positive article about how you can use systems thinking to kind of have a successful outcome. And in my experience, doing data modeling and strategic planning, it's not that easy. And I think that what I find is that people never really plan for the absolute worst case. They plan for the worst that they can imagine, and it's rarely as bad as it can be. So I think if we're going to use systems thinking to bring about a really useful distance learning model, we need to think about what happens when everything goes wrong.